Jazzcast Pros.
Hello and welcome back to High Vibe Table Talks. I am your host, Rashawn Hargrave, and today we are taking a spin on my latest series, which was Big Businesses That Failed and what we can learn from them. And I'm doing kind of the other side of the coin of that series, the Power Move series. And what the series is going to be about is companies that either pivoted really well, niched down really well, did something really well to really blow up their business and make it super successful. And again, what we as entrepreneurs can learn from them. The first episode is going to be about the company Michelin. Now, when I say the company Michelin, what do you think of? I am a foodie. I love food. I love hearing stories about food. I love hearing stories about chefs. Anthony Bourdain is actually someone who I always think of Michelin stars. There are other people around who think of tires, and actually they are the same company. I was listening to a podcast where Gordon Ramsay was the guest and he was talking about this, and I just found, I can't remember if that's the first time I ever heard that they are the same company, but it really piqued my interest around them being the same company and how that came to be. Like Michelin star restaurants and tires being the same company just blew my mind. So today we're going to talk about the history of the company, how they branched off into the food industry, and how they have this brand around both of those things, and then what we can learn from that as entrepreneurs. Welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the current or aspiring solopreneur, navigate the messy middle so you can make both an income and an impact. Hi, I'm Rashawn, and I love creating safe spaces for women to be courageous in their dreams. After spending a decade working in sales for a startup and talking with hundreds of other women entrepreneurs, I know it can be lonely, but you can do this. We are having impactful conversations with people walking similar paths to you, so pull up a seat. This is High Vibe Table Talks. So, in 1889, brothers Edouard and André Michelin were running a small rubbery factory in Clermont-Ferrand, France. And so they actually created a breakthrough in the rubber industry and created pneumatic tires for bicycles, which eventually led to the same product for cars, which then obviously became a huge thing. The problem was that France had fewer than 3,000 cars on the road. And so if no one's driving and no one's driving very far, no matter how good your product is, people aren't going to buy it. Like there's just not a demand for what you have to offer. And so they didn't want to just sit around and say, well, eventually when there's more cars around, we're going to be more successful. They had a really interesting question that they asked themselves, which was, how can we create more demand for our product? How can we inspire people to use our product more often? And so, I talk a lot in this podcast about the what that you have to offer. And so they didn't want to focus on the tire alone. They wanted to focus on the experience of driving. So where do people drive? Why do people drive? How do people have the experience of getting from one place to another? They decided to create a Michelin guide, which was a free pocket-sized booklet that gave the motorists a map, suggested road trips, fun places they could go, instructions for changing a tire, a list of mechanics and gas stations along each part of the route. And then there was a section that was dedicated to places to eat and sleep. So it kind of was this trial run of, here are other things that we can offer people who drive, people that are taking their bikes, and see what resonated with people. We talk a lot about like testing different offers and being the Thomas Edisons of your market and saying, okay, what resonates with people here? What resonates with people here? And they really started to notice that the restaurant section really was what people were gravitating towards. And so people began planning these trips around the restaurants that Michelin was naming in their guide. And over time, that tiny section, that little section around restaurants really evolved into something bigger. So as they kind of ran with it and had more and more success with it, they started to lean in even more. In the 1920s, Michelin started sending anonymous inspectors to evaluate the restaurants. And so they would go in and how is the service? How is the food? How is the ambiance? And they had a rating system for each restaurant. And the people would go and the restaurant wouldn't know. They wouldn't find out until after the inspector paid for the meal themselves. And then in 1926, they began awarding stars. And so based on this anonymous inspector's experience in your restaurant, you received stars. Today, that is probably the most prestigious culinary ranking in the world. Chefs dream of earning a star. Gordon Ramsay, on the episode he was talking, I think he has 22 total stars. And it's just really interesting how this company, who is one of the most renowned tire companies in the industry, is also the highest renowned culinary rankings companies in the world. Another fun fact is that it's not just about, like, most of the Michelin star restaurants that you go to are this like high-end dining experience. You know, you have to make reservations months in advance. They cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It's a very specific experience that you have, like you put in your meal ahead of time. But that's not the only type of restaurant that will earn a Michelin star. There is this Hawker Chan in Singapore, a street food vendor that has a $2.50 Michelin star chicken dish. There are taco stands in Mexico, ramen shops in Japan. And so it's not only reserved for the high-end dining experience, while that is most of what you will see and what is part of the Michelin brand. It's so fascinating that both sides of this business really, really thrive. And they seem like such opposite ends, but when they started, it really made sense that they were, two spokes of the same wheel, reinforcing the brand's values, the brand trust. So they didn't ever even pivot, which I talked a lot in the last series about pivoting. They didn't really pivot. They just created this new lane, this new experience for the same type of customer that they were already providing a service for. Kind of the what of the what of the what that they were building was trust. Can I safely get from point A to point B with your tires? They actually created the first run flat tire, which allows you to drive up to 50 miles after a puncture. So even if you get a flat tire, let's say you run over a nail or a shard glass, whatever, you can still go 50 miles, which is really important when you're getting from point A to point B. And then they built this trust of, like, once you are there, you are going to have a really high level experience of eating when you end up at this restaurant. So it's like the trust that your experience is going to be as high level as possible when you go with our brand. What, as entrepreneurs, can we learn about building our business from a company like Michelin? Sometimes your next big move isn't necessarily, the next big product, the next big idea, the next big thing. It is, how can I take my customers' current experience that they already love, that I'm really good at, and how can I support that? How can I really understand my customer experience from beginning to end and add a layer on top of that? Now, I preach a lot about niching down and not being like, if I just do this, then I'll be more successful. If I just add this, then all these people will flock in and buy what I have to offer. And I'm going to be talking about this later in the series, but you have to first be known for the thing. Once you really have leaned in and people know you for that specific thing, and I have someone come to me saying, hey, do you know a realtor that I can use? Do you know someone? Do you know an electrician? Do you know someone? I'm really having problems with my garden soil. Can you help me with that? I'm looking for a money coach. Every single one of those, I have one person in mind that I would say, yes, here's a name and a number, use my name, I'm referring you to them. I have one person who I'm going to say, this is the person you should use. I would say don't add another layer on until you're known as that person. They were known as creating really top level tires. They just didn't have enough people who needed tires to come to them. And so don't use this episode as an excuse to be like, well, I just need to create something else, then I will have more customers. Become the person who is known for that one thing, and then see how you can expand on your customer experience. Michelin was known for trust. They're trusting that you can get from A to B, and people really trusted they could get from A to B. Now that I'm at B, now what do I do? Now they're going to expand the customer experience on that. And so if you are in the space where you're known for the one thing, you're known for ADHD home decor or creating spaces that are cozy for neurodivergence, now how can you create something that people are going to be able to have to expand upon that? Can you create your own thing that really elevates that experience? I did want to add one more interesting anecdote that I learned while reading about chefs earning their Michelin star. And stars are reevaluated year after year. So I said that Gordon Ramsay has 22 total stars. He currently has 8 because he had restaurants that had Michelin stars, and either the restaurant closed, they lost their stars, whatever it was. So restaurants he currently runs or owns have 8, but in total he has received 22. Some chefs have actually publicly returned their stars due to the pressure of maintaining them. There was Sebastian Bros in 2017 who returned his. And some of that is just due to the pressure that you now have to show up at that level. Like Michelin stars are at a certain level of, service, ambiance, as I said. Like there's all these things that they're rated on. And so as the relaxed entrepreneur, as the cozy CEO, as someone who wants you to build a business that supports your lifestyle, not the other way around, remember that. There are these chefs who devote their careers to having a Michelin star, and then they get one and they're like, this is not what I thought it would be. And so A, it's okay to pivot. It's okay to return your star because it's not what you thought it would be. And B, if that is what you're looking to achieve, just remember that this is about your business supporting your lifestyle. What do you want your day-to-day to look like? And I will say that with, I'm working through the Artist's Way right now. And in one of the things it talks about, what other lives would you want to have? That was one of the prompts. And so it's think about all the other things that you could do and come up with 5 other lives that you could have. And I love cooking. I love learning about cooking. I love cooking for people. I love breaking bread over a table of fresh food that I just made. It is definitely part of my love language. But I would never want to go back to culinary school and work in a restaurant, because the lifestyle of owning and running or even working in a restaurant, if you've seen The Bear, is very intense. It's very high level, a lot of burnout. It's very aggressive. It's just all of these things that yes, I love providing food for people that I care about. And I love people eating food that I made and being oh, it is so good. That is so important to me. But the other side of that same coin when it comes to owning a restaurant is something that a position I would never want to be in. That being said, I have farm to table dinners at my house every year where I take food from my garden, add in I don't have cows and make my own cheese, but all the vegetables that I use, I grow from my garden. And then I have some close friends come over and I make a, 4 or 5 course meal with appetizers and courses. And then we eat and we talk and we laugh and we drink wine, and it fills that part of my cup. And so I know that about myself. I know that I could never be coaching my daughter's teams if I worked in a restaurant. I would miss a lot of her games if I worked in a restaurant. My husband and I would be even more 2 ships passing in the night if I worked in a restaurant. And so if at one point you think like, oh, I would love to work in or run a Michelin star restaurant, that is an incredible goal to have. And then if you reach that and realize the trade-offs that I have to have in order to get that are not what I realized or thought, that's okay. That doesn't make that dream any less worthy or your time spent doing it less important. You know, as I said before, like when I worked in the Pilates studio, checked a lot of boxes that I really thought that were perfect for my lifestyle and what I was building. And then I got there and was like, oh, this is draining my soul so much. Not because of the people, just because of the demands of the job that were somewhat invisible before I experienced them. And I think the same thing can be said for things like working in a restaurant, things like having a Michelin star, things that you think are going to be this barometer of, am I successful? And if you hit that and then realize that like, this was not made for me, that is okay. That is very valid. And this is your lifestyle and you get to do whatever way you want to do it. I will wrap up the episode here. Speaking of building businesses the way that you want to, this is my podcast, so I'm going to do it the way that I want. And typically for most of the year, I do solo episode, guest episode, solo episode, guest episode. And that's how I rotate back and forth. For the month of July, you know, lacrosse season was very busy. I want to take time during the summer to like be able to just drop whatever I'm doing and go to the pool, go to the beach, go on a road trip, go whatever, you know. My daughter created a bucket list, and so I'm trying to make sure that like each week we carve out time to do something on that bucket list, big or small. She had Disney World on there. Sorry, lady, not happening. But, you know, she wants to go to the planetarium. Let's do that on a Tuesday afternoon. So I am batch recording a lot of my episodes. I don't have any guest episodes recorded at the moment. So for the next few weeks-ish, they are all going to be solo episodes. I'm going to continue to go with this series around power moves and how companies really made power moves to create more success, sustain success. And so I'm really excited. Next week, I'm going to be talking about Anheuser-Busch and what they did during Prohibition to stay successful, which is really interesting. You know, like literally their business was illegal. all of a sudden, it was illegal. And they stayed in business and they maintained success for 13 years until Prohibition was removed. And so that's a really interesting series. I'm also going to be talking about Band-Aid and chapstick. I'm going to be talking about Wegmans, which again, if you're from Rochester, is probably near and dear to your heart. So I'm very excited to kind of do the other side of the same coin that was my last series, which I really enjoyed doing. So if I have one ask, if you've made it this far in the episode, I would love if you rated the podcast on whatever podcast player you're listening to. The 5 stars and the reviews of podcasts mean a lot, and it would mean so much to me if you took a couple minutes out of your day today and did that for us. So until next time, remember that big dreams and small steps will transform your life.